Welcome then to Tatum Talks, catching up with British Speedway legend and commentator on TNT Sports for the British and Grand Prix coverage, Kelvin Tatum. And since we last chatted, Kelvin, there's been a little bit going on. I think probably water under the bridge now, really. Prague Grand Prix took place, but really at this moment in time, focus and people still reflecting on what happened in Manchester at the weekend. A lot has been said about Grand Prix in Britain, of course, losing Cardiff being one thing, and then Manchester getting a second Grand Prix. So for the first time we had two Grand Prix, but then Cardiff, of course, disappeared. 2 nights in Manchester, would it work, was the question, and I think they firmly answered, yes, it can, and 2 great nights of racing. We'll come to the Saturday, obviously second. We'll start with the Friday, and looking at some of the chat around some of the statisticians from around the world, and a lot of people saying that this will go down as one of the great Grand Prix of the Grand Prix era.
Yeah, it's obviously it's very fresh in the memory. It's sometimes difficult to remember so far back. We've been running Grand Prix since 1995, and there's been some pretty standout meetings through that period. But there's no question the very first inaugural Grand Prix in the National Speedway Stadium was spectacular. And I think it was extra special from a British perspective because we had, Dan Bewley's timing is pretty cool. It was spot on to win the meeting. As a home rider in front of his audience was very special indeed. I think the night was terrific, and I think it just showed how good the sport can be. Didn't need bells and whistles and lights and flashes, it was just pure racing of the very highest level, and I just sensed that people were absolutely blown away with it. I think we had a moment in the second night on Saturday where Jorge Villegas actually dive bombed and gate crashed and into a chat between Tony Ricardson and Greg Hancock. And even he was sort of waxing lyrical about it. So, yeah, it was a wonderful night, and I'm chuffed to bits that the weather behaved and we saw something very special.
We certainly did. We'll talk about the winner first of all, then Dan Bewley. I think sometimes, and we've talked about this before, that when you have a major international event on your home track, it can actually not work out exactly as you'd hope. Some home riders often find it quite difficult to win on their home circuit. Perhaps the track is prepared slightly differently. Perhaps you've got that extra pressure and expectation and distraction of maybe media interviews, or the fans are on you and you're not focusing the way that you normally would. But for Dan Bewley, he rode through all that, and actually he rode his league machinery, didn't he? He stuck faithful with the equipment that he would go there as a Bellevue rider with.
Which would make sense. You're riding there, on a regular basis, and you've got bikes that are set up, and it would seem rather odd if you suddenly introduced equipment that you've never used there. So I get that one. I think that was a bright, wise move to make. Dan's night started off slowly, steadily. I think he had a third and a second to begin with, and as the evening sort of rolled on, he got better and better. His last chance qualifying race was extraordinary. That alone was like spectacular for him to, and the crowd were on their feet, and it was like he'd won the meeting actually. And then for him to come out and do what he did in the final, which actually surpassed what he did in the LCQ. I mean, that you couldn't script it. That was just Hollywood written all over it, wasn't it? It was just sensational stuff. So yeah, it was not just the fact that he won, Ian, it was the way he won, and it was something that will be remembered for an awful long time. So yeah, it was one of the best Grand Prix victories I've witnessed in 25 years.
There's been a lot said about the National Speedway Stadium. People have been saying, why is it taking so long to get a Grand Prix on there? It's not easy to get a Grand Prix. You've got to go through quite a process. You don't just sort of turn up and put one on. But they've made it happen. And actually, for a venue that's 10 years or so old, it's still a young venue in the world of of Speedway, and to have a Grand Prix even at this stage is probably pretty impressive. But it did deliver on the promise that people were saying, we will get great racing here if you put the world stars on it, and it really did show what it can do again.
Yeah, absolutely, and we've witnessed some British finals there over the recent years with not the same level of line-up, and they've still produced smashing racing and league racing. They see it every week there. You know, they might not see it as much in every race, but they do see some pretty special stuff. Yeah, I think, you know, the demise of Cardiff was Bellevue's game. I think there was always this philosophy and thought process that Cardiff was the pinnacle of the sport. It was the jewel in the crown, as it were, on the calendar of the Grand Prix, and they didn't want to undermine that by running a second Grand Prix in Bellevue. Now, this was the perfect timing, and I think from a point of view of racing, pure racing, then Bellevue's knocked the spots off anyway, not just Cardiff. It was just fabulous. The only thing that, obviously, quite clearly, you haven't got the attendance. You just can't have the attendance, because even on a bad year in Cardiff, the attendance over 2 nights doesn't reach what you would get in an ordinary year in Cardiff. So that's something that financially will have an impact on running events there. But as a venue, as a racetrack, to put the Grand Prix on the world stage, to, you know, maybe transcend the sport just for a few days, then that type of racing will do that.
The other couple of questions, really, obviously from the podium, there was a question mark about Brady Kurtz, his fitness. He crashed, of course, in Prague, hasn't ridden since for any of his teams, Poland or here or anywhere else. And so there was always that doubt of whether he was going to make it. Will he be actually in the lineup? And it was sort of a bit of a closely guarded secret whether he was going to ride or not. He did. Gets himself onto the podium on both nights, but clearly riding through the pain barrier on the second night after another tumble. But a great effort from him to come back, and again on your home track, it can always be easy, especially if you've got doubts about your fitness too.
Yes, he played it cool after Prague coming off, and he landed heavily on his shoulder, and you could see that was an awkward crash. Didn't ride for Bellevue on the Monday when TNT were in town at Birmingham. Didn't ride for Wrocław. So it didn't get talked about a lot, actually, in my opinion, coming into it. There was just this assumption that he would be there. He was there, and right from qualifying on Friday afternoon, he looked quite comfortable on the bike, and he made another sprint race. So he did. It wasn't inhibiting him in any way in that regard, but great result for Kurtz and for the club. You know, both Bellevue riders on the rostrum, first and third. Again, that can only add to it. And Kurtz is looking terrific, and he hasn't won a Grand Prix. The only thing I would say is that Zmarzlik is annoying him, I would say, because he keeps, as well as Kurtz is going, Zmarzlik on Friday didn't look that good, but he went straight to the final and he finished second, and he got 2 points out of the sprint race. So he got 20 points on Friday when he didn't look that good. So it must be, people must leave the stadium and go, how are we going to get the better of this guy? You know. So, but Kurtz, on Friday did a great job.
And I think as well, just it doesn't feel like it's his first season in the Grand Prix, does it?
No.
He's riding like an established rider that's been there, seen it, done it, and he's saying we're starting to see a bit of a rivalry between Brady Kurtz and Bartosz Zmarzlik, I think, and it also goes back to Poland, because the two of them have had a couple of ding-dong battles in Extraliga as well for their clubs. So there is a bit of needle perhaps forming between them. They've had some great races, and I think Kurtz has come out on top on a few of those. So, but when you consider the fact that this is a new rider to the Grand Prix, it's rare that we see a rider come in and be so dominant, perhaps, so far in their debut season.
The last time I can remember, it was 2017 when Patrick Dudek came in and he ran Jason Doyle close in the World Championship. He finished second in the World Championship. I think that was possibly the last time I remember it being quite such an impact from a new rider to the series. Brady Kurtz, you're absolutely right. The way he speaks, the way he's conducting himself, he's a mature, grown-up speedway rider, professional speedway rider. It was quite interesting. I reflected on just reading between the lines on some of the couple of interviews that Abbey had on the centre green. Like Kurt said, I'm in this chase, and he was quite forthright about his prospects moving forward. And then it was quite interesting that Bartosz Zmarzlik is very aware of what Kurtz is doing, and he sort of responded in a way that he was delighted to have won at a track that he didn't particularly feel very comfortable on, and to win here in England, he's quite an understated guy, but he's smart, and I just thought, yeah, we've got it. And I think I may have said it once or twice in commentary. It reminds me of the sort of, not quite the same, but it's close to what potentially Laguta and Zmarzlik did a few years ago. And it will only enhance the series, won't it? It will only keep it fantastic, because with respect to Holder and who won in Warsaw, now and Bewley, they haven't got the consistency that Kurtz has got, and that's the key to it.
Yeah. Absolutely, and people talk about Bartosz. It's the series maybe getting boring because Zmarzlik keeps winning, but I think at the same time we've got to recognise that he is, and probably is, going to end up at this stage at least as the greatest Grand Prix rider of all time. By the time his career finishes, he's 30 now. He's got a long way to go. But for him to come here to Manchester, was a lot said about Zmarzlik, that this was going to be his undoing, that perhaps this was a damage limitation couple of rounds really for him to sort of stay in the mix, but to get on the podium both times and of course win the second one as well. He's more than done that. But just seeing him ride, I'm not really a Zmarzlik fanboy. I've not seen him ride often. I've only ever seen him ride in the Grand Prix and in person at Cardiff, which is not really not sort of a full bore Zmarzlik quite often. But to see him in action on the Saturday night, some of the moves he made, he was riding so close to the fence. I've never seen anybody ride quite that close. When he made that overtake in the final, it was practically Tony Ricardson wall of death. He was that close to it. And you think, well, fair play. Fair play. He's come right from third, flies around the bend, goes around the lot of them, and you think, you know what? He's a rider.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. And he. Yeah. How do I reply to that? He's the best rider out there right now. He is the best rider out there, and certainly you could argue that the strength and depth of the Grand Prix at this stage is not the same as it once was. We will reflect in history. We've got Tony Ricardson walking around. He's got 6 world titles. It looks more than likely that Bartosz Zmarzlik over the next 5 years will beat that. But will people reflect on it? Well, were they as hard earned as Tony's were? Difficult one. I would suggest that the lineup when Tony was riding was possibly a little bit more deeper in strength, because you had quite a lot of world champions that he was beating: Crump, Pedersen, Golub, Hancock. You had that type of lineup. It was pretty spectacular. But you can only beat who's on offer to beat, and he's doing it. His skill on the bike is extraordinary. His brain, his thought process is fabulous, and he can do stuff on the motorbike that other people can only dream about. And you witnessed it. You've just described some of the things he was doing there, and he does that quite regularly. So he's going to be a tough nut to crack, and I think he will be. I think the way he was, his demeanour, and the way his body language was at the conclusion of Saturday night, I think he feels the job done, because that was a real challenge for him coming to England. He didn't quite know how that was going to work out.
And he's overtaken his idol, hasn't he, Thomas Golub, there, as far as GP finals and GP overall GP wins, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So he's
29 wins. I can't remember. To be honest, those stats, they sort of like, I'm not that excited about them, but I know he mentioned the fact that he moved on to 29 Grand Prix wins. But I think the most important one is the fact that he leads the World Championship. He's won 3 Grand Prix out of 5. It's a pretty decent stat.
It's not a bad stat, is it? Yeah. So he's on 60. He's overtaken Golub on wins, but also on the most finals as well. Therefore,
okay.
So he's now third in all time in that one, behind Hancock and Crump. He's got a bit of a way to go yet to catch those guys up, though. To be fair, but he's still got a long time left to go. But I think his decision making as well, and that's the other thing that we see the moves, but the decision to make the move he really anticipates what the rider in front's going to do. And there was one heat, and I forget who it was. It might well have been Jack Holder, who you could see that Jack Holder was making that move. The bike was starting to drift wide. He was going for a wider line. The bike just sort of started to edge to the right, and as soon as his bike edged just an inch to the right, Zmarzlik went left. There was the decision of straight away, then committing to what he was going to do, because he just anticipated, I can see that bike is now tipping to the right, I'm going left. And it was just like, click of a finger, he was there.
Yeah, so split-second decisions he makes, and he's definitive with those. I think he found himself in some awkward positions on Friday where he didn't quite commit to the inside or the outside, and he actually found himself come undone. Certainly in the sprint race he did with Kurtz. He didn't quite know what to do. But interestingly, when he came back on Saturday, he actually he clearly reflected on it, because he committed to the outside or to the inside, and primarily committed to the outside and realised that that's where it was going to be. And people like Bewley and Kurtz, who ride there regularly, he reflected on what they were doing, because Bewley's ride in the final was pretty spectacular on Friday night. He did a bit of a Tony Ricardson up down, right round the air fence, and it was a fabulous ride. And I'm sure he's reflected on that and sort of thought, right, if that's what it takes here, that's what we need to be doing. And he got up to that on the Saturday night. So yeah, I think Friday, just to sort of sum Friday up, I think it was one of the best Speedway Grand Prix. I can't say it was the best one, but it was certainly. I saw one in Bydgoszcz in 2013 which would rival it. It was truly remarkable, with riders like Darcy Ward, Chris Holder Younger, Ty Woofenden, Emil Seifutenhoff, Nicky Pedersen, all of that. That was really quite a special night, and Bydgoszcz is one of those tracks. But there's no doubt that meeting was very good. I was expecting a little bit more from Robert Lambert, actually. I think Robert Lambert had a couple of nights where he will probably be scratching his head a touch, I would think, because having won the British final in May, I got the feeling that he would be a finalist at least one night. For that not to have happened, in actual fact on Saturday not to actually make the LCQ, it sort of went from average to, it was okay, and he sort of scraped in. And with this system, which I'm not a lover of, actually, I don't like the race format, but for him to then not even make the top 10 on Saturday night, that was a bit of a shock to me. I think he'll be really disappointed.
Yeah, well, let's move on to the Saturday. But yeah, Robert Lambert is a place to start there. He did struggle a little bit, and I think as well, whilst it's a big boost for the likes of Brady Kurtz and Bartosz Zmarzlik, but getting on the podium the both nights. If you have two dodgy meetings, that's it is still 20% of the series or so, isn't it? That you've had those dodgy nights on the same track, of course. But on the Saturday night, it was slightly different. The weather, the weather was absolutely was biblical. Just north of Manchester, because I came down from Cumbria and it was raining its face off all day. So if they were holding it at Workington, it wouldn't have happened. But it was in Manchester, so that was all right. And it was. It was all right, but I know that there was some rain during the day. That maybe changed the track complexion a little bit. But for the meeting, the conditions were pretty perfect, and we did still. I think had we not had Friday to be a benchmark by, we would still be reflecting on Saturday being another great Grand Prix with some great racing in it.
Oh yeah, crikey, yes, and we had very high standards, and Saturday had quite a lot to live up to. So you're absolutely right. You can say, well, Friday was slightly better than Saturday, but Saturday still had plenty to offer. Certainly did. And the conditions were probably affected by, I can understand it with Phil Morris. It's a huge event. He doesn't want to lose it. So inevitably it's raining in the afternoon. You cannot go Garrity. You cannot take a risk. And to be honest, I think they found a balance with the track that was acceptable. I don't think anybody left there saying it was rubbish. I really don't. No. I think when you think about Robert's performances over the 2 days, he seemed to be overriding a little bit. It was like the bike wasn't quite there, the setup wise, and he was trying to make up for that with being really aggressive on track. And it's kind of, they went down the wrong road, and they just couldn't quite get it right. And Saturday, it got worse. and I would think that I'm a bit perplexed, and I'm sure they are as a team, why they didn't crack it, and they not to make the top 10. That's a real disappointment. And he's going to Gorjov this weekend at a meeting last year where he tripped up. He didn't do very well there last year. That was his worst result of the season. So his Grand Prix campaign, I would think, having looked at that, he would have probably looked at Bellevue as a way to turn it around and really start making a big impression in the championship. But it hasn't happened, so he's got a lot of work to do. I think one or two other riders were disappointing. I think Andrei Lebedev's, that had a very good start to the season, was really poor. I think, do you know what, Ian? I wonder whether people like Anders Thompson, Andrei Lebedev's, to a lesser degree Mikkelsen, Kai Hülkenberg had a better run on Saturday. But some of these guys, I think they might be a bit intimidated about coming to the UK. Because we do have different conditions. We do have different material. We have grip on the track. And when you look at what they ride on week in, week out in Poland, they don't. They don't have it. It's literally, they have a template that goes around the whole league. And it's the same everywhere you go, whether you're in Torun or in Lublin or in Wrocław or in Rzeszów, it's the same. So I think that becomes now quite intimidating, because these guys are riding 90% of the time pretty much they can pretty much have the same bike everywhere they go. I don't think it's healthy, and I wonder whether it just weighs on those guys' minds because they're not quite sure. And it's also the technique on the bike. Britain has always done it. If you talk to Ricardson and Hancock, they will tell you that riding in the UK on all these different variety of shapes and sizes and surfaces that you encounter in the UK, it enhances your ability to ride the bike properly and encounter it. If you're just riding on a slick, beautifully prepared track every week, well, those skills are just not required, and you can get away with being a little bit one trick pony, and that is what is happening. And I think that we saw a little bit of that over the last weekend.
Yeah, I did do an interview with Phil Morris last week, actually, and he did say that he'd had a call or two calls from, he didn't name them, but Grand Prix level or Grand Prix riders, expressing an interest in wanting to come and race in the UK. Whether they will or not, that's down to a club signing them and all the small print. But we are seeing that, and you look at the podiums that we've had. And riders that are up there, it's not like it's dominated by riders who don't ride or have never ridden in Britain. As they say, it's part of their toolkit. I mean, Bartosz Zmarzlik did 3 heats at Birmingham, and that's all he needed. He's a quick learner, but they've all been there. They've all been there.
Yeah, he rather microwaved his British Speedway career. Just needed 3. He only needed what? Well, he only needed 3 minutes, and that was enough, and he was done. And but as I say, he is an exception to the rule. But I saw Bartosz Zmarzlik at the former under-21 world champion, Polish lad, at Birmingham, and he came over with Tobias Michałek, and there's no doubt that he hasn't got enough rides, and he's looking at possibly coming to the UK to ride. These kids will need to do it. They will need to do it. Because there's no question that, as I described a moment ago, you can't learn all your skills if you're not being asked those questions. And you need to be. You need to be.
Yeah, we did an interview last night at the time of recording this with Christoph Kasperzak was at Birmingham last night.
Okay.
Again, he was working. He was due to be working with Josh Pickering, but obviously Josh Pickering for that meeting was injured. He got injured at the weekend in Poland, but he came over anyway with Tobias Michałek. And he was saying a similar thing, that that it is important for riders from Poland or wherever to come over to British Speedway and experience the different tracks, and then that's something that you have in your kit. And we saw it as well in Poland a few weeks ago, where Zach Cook made his debut. He was riding for Wrocław, filling in for Brady Kurtz. It was a meeting at Czestochowa. The track was not great. There was a bit of a wet one, a lumpy old track. But he and Dan Bewley, they were filling their boots out there because they're kind of used to it.
Mm. Well, exactly. They're going to encounter that when they go to Manchester. Even on a normal night, you're going to come into the first corner at the National Stadium and run up, and you're going to be in some deep dirt around the outside. And hang on, you've got to understand what's going to happen. And they looked at that and go, well, no problem. I know how to deal with that. Whereas if you don't, and you look at it, you're frightened of it. And you'll be going up to your team manager and say, this meeting should be off. Exactly that. And so that's again comes back to if you're only being allowed to ride in these beautiful conditions, and then you're not going to be. And it's a problem for Poland young riders. It's a problem for them, because if you turn up and you're 17 years old, you've got lovely equipment and you've got beautiful conditions and sit on the bike. I watch some of them and they're lazy on the bike, but they can get away with it. Whereas you look at Zmarzlik, he's very athletic on the bike, he moves forward, he can stick the handlebar on the ground, he knows exactly what he needs to be doing. He's got all the tools in the toolbox. Some of these guys haven't. And that's when they come to a place like Manchester and they went, and they might just be a little bit lost. And if you're just a touch sort of reticent and you're not quite committed, then you're going to find it very difficult.
And I think on the other side of it as well is that the two great meetings that we've had at Manchester do actually serve as an advert. People say everything's an advert for Speedway, but I never subscribe to, because I think that that's a different aspect. But in terms of being an advert for British Speedway for a rider, people see the great racing there at Manchester, and that is something that you that might well make a rider sit up and take notice. You see a great Grand Prix there, you think, well, those tracks aren't as bad as perhaps people have been saying, and come over and give it a go.
Oh, there's no question that there's been definitely some negative press about riding in the UK over the years, no doubt about that, frightening riders away from it. And look, at times some of the tracks are pretty tricky, and there was a period of time when, like it was considered dangerous to be riding in the UK. The sport's dangerous, full stop. Ask Ty Woofenden. Ask Ty Woofenden. So the fact of the matter is that we can go on about this all night, but the fact is that the two meetings there in Bellevue were wonderful. I think some of the riders might have been a touch intimidated by it. They didn't figure it out whatsoever, but we saw World Championship Speedway of the highest order, and I think Bellevue, Mark Lemon, his team can be very proud of what they achieved. What the future holds for it as a Grand Prix venue, I'd like to think we'll be back there. But there are lots of question marks about what's going on in the future, full stop. But right now, here, a couple of days later, I thought it was great. And Gorzoff this weekend's got a fair bit to live up to, hasn't it? No question about that.
Yeah, hasn't it just? Yeah, I think just to round up the Manchester thing, there were a few issues on the first night, but I think if you're holding any event, any event is going to have issues. We've had issues with queues for bars at Cardiff before. We've had issues getting in at Cardiff before. These are things that are not new to any stadium. You're hosting a new event for the first time. Some things are only going to come to light when you actually do it. But I will say I went on the Saturday, and all the things that were said about the Friday didn't seem to be an issue on the Saturday. They got extra people in. I got to the front of the bar queue and I was served by Mark Lemon's wife, so everybody was getting involved. And but let's see. I'm sure that if they have an event, I guess the thing is, would it be, if it did happen again, would it be two Grand Prix? From talking to Phil Morris, he sort of intimated maybe it might be a situation of an SGP2 and a GP, maybe in future. It feels like there needs to be more than just the one-off event there to make it pay, though.
Trouble is, people don't come to watch SGP2. They don't. I haven't seen a decent crowd at an SGP2 meeting yet. People want to come and watch the real deal. And Friday was you had everything. You had qualifying and a Grand Prix. On Saturday you didn't have the qualifying, so you didn't quite, whether you like it or not, there was a race on for World Championship points on Friday afternoon. and if you'd taken the day off, then you would have been able to pop in there, go back out and come back for the evening. SGP2, as much as I think the Under-21 World Championship is worthwhile and it's a stepping stone, so far, since the introduction of it running alongside Grand Prix, it's almost taken something away from the championship, because those kids are riding in empty stadiums. You know, I think maybe Riga, there were a few people there, Riga, but apart from that, in places like Melilla, the interesting Voyens, I'm not so sure there'll be a big crowd for that this year.
Yeah, it all comes to a culmination, doesn't it, in Voyens for the final one. But we do have a couple of riders in there, though, for Great Britain this year on SGP2 when that does start, with Dan Thompson in as a wild card and Jake Mulford's qualified. So that's coming up soon, isn't it? Yeah, next month.
Next month, beginning of next month in Melilla, the first round. I really hope Dan Thompson's fit. If he's fit with that scaphoid, Dan Thompson will have half a chance, I think, because he's a handy rider. Such a shame he got hurt, to be honest. It's definitely affecting the Ipswich Ridges, but there's no doubt that we got Melilla, then it's it finishes in, and we've got Melilla, Riga and Voyens for SGP2, and if it'll be cool to see the Polish domination broken, because at SGP2 it's sort of like, I can't remember, 15 or 16 consecutive years. I mean, they've done it. I mean, it's ridiculous, their record at that level. But no. Just a sec. I've got a new phone, I think, arrived.
All right. Exciting times.
On your phone?
Yeah.
I need it, because you won't give me it otherwise.
There you go. 1253.
Right.
There you go.
Job's a good one.
Yeah. I'd like to think that we can have Jake Mulford and our two men can do quite nicely in that. But on reflection of the weekend, I thought it was pretty special, and I think the double headers actually, we had double headers in COVID, and a lot of people that I spoke to, they loved them. They really enjoyed them, even from the TV perspective. Like, it was Friday night, watch the GP, and can't wait to see what happens next tomorrow night. And I think they work. But as soon as COVID was over, then that's gone, and we haven't gone back to it. This was exceptional circumstances with the last minute cancellation of Cardiff, wasn't it? It was, and clearly they couldn't get another venue elsewhere to sort of fill the gap in July. But I wouldn't mind it, but I doubt it'll happen.
Yeah, I think politically it would be an interesting situation if any country other than Poland were to be able to have back-to-back Grand Prix, and I think that is where the issue is likely to come in, isn't it, from the PZM and so on.
Probably.
So then Gorzów next, Bartosz Zmarzlik back on his home track, having been the tricky away round navigated by winning the last round on the track that he was supposed to do terribly at. Now he's back on his home circuit, and fully expecting him to go and continue the domination, I suspect, this weekend.
Well, I think it's like the reverse psychology now, isn't it? Because the challenges that Bartosz Zmarzlik had last weekend is what Brady Kurtz is going to face this weekend. He's going into the Lions' Den, which is the world champions' backyard. And Brady Kurtz, he seems to be right up for the challenge. I'm expecting a big performance from him again. But, these are all new, these type of scenarios to Brady. And he's coping with it admirably. But there's a steely determination about Bartosz Zmarzlik. He don't want to give his championship up. But what I hope for, purely as a neutral, is that we have a second half of the season, that we have them two going head to head, and we have a wonderful shootout for the World Championship, and he doesn't run away with it, because he's setting a very high standard. I did mention the fact that I didn't like the format. I'm going to finish. I want to say something about that. I think that the qualifying I like. I think that brings a jeopardy to the television programme that we didn't previously have. but I don't like the fact that you can have a desperately disappointing night and still win. I don't like it. It seems to it's rewarding mediocrity, in my opinion. And you can have a guy that scores 12 points and makes the LCQ. You can have 6 and take a chance and get in, and that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, well, Dan Bewley probably an example of that from the weekend, where he seemed like he'd had a disaster. He even came round and did his sort of farewell goodbye after his last programmed ride, and then found himself by countback in the LCQ.
Exactly, and I think like Dominic Kubera was one in Warsaw. He went 0-3, 0-3, 0, and he had 6 points, and he made it because he had 2 wins. Ended up in the final. You know what I mean? And he ended up with 6. He turned it into 14. I'm not sure that works for me. And I'll be interested to see if the FIM reflect on that. As I say, we will see. It's not a desperate thing. It's just, I suppose I'm speaking from a rider's perspective. It just seems a little bit too. When you've got guys that have just missed out, like Max Frick, he's a classic example. Max Frick rode beautifully and then slipped up and didn't make the final. And you can make the final on 6. And he should have gone straight in. I'm not sure that balance is quite right, but we'll see. We'll see what they do with that.
Yeah, bit of a learning curve, I suppose. Next up, Gorzhov, and we'll see if Bartosz Zmarzlik can continue his domination, because, as you say, we just want a fight with someone, and it looks like it's those two pulling away now. Lindgren's now in third, and he's got a bit of a gap between Kurtz and Lindgren, so it is boiling down now to be Brady Kurtz and Zmarzlik as it goes.
Yeah, well, it's kind of building up that way, and it's been that way since the start. I fancied that Kurtz would win one of the nights in Manchester. It didn't transpire. I thought he would win on Saturday, but it didn't quite happen. But he's going to win a Grand Prix very soon. If he keeps riding like he is, he's going to do it. But from an interest point of view, from a point of view of keeping it alive and exciting, long may that continue.
Just to touch on British Speedway, not been too many meetings really the last few weeks. It's been a fairly steady away kind of period, not least with some rain-offs and stuff as well. But the Ipswich Witches, they continue at the top of the table, but their lead is, at the time of recording this, 1 point. So they've been firmly reined in, and those injuries we talked about, obviously Jason Doyle, again a question mark with him. He was back for Ipswich on Monday night, but he only had 2 rides and then had to withdraw, so question mark there for him, for Gorzhov as well, I guess. But also Dan Thompson being on the sidelines. Once again the Witches hit by some injuries, and
yes, it's all going on here this morning. Crack on. Start again.
I'll just pick up. So the injuries have hit the Ipswich Witches again. Once again, when they were going well. Maybe the difference this year is hopefully they're expecting the riders back at full fitness sooner than later.
Yeah, well, let's hope so. Jason Doyle was very brave in his attempt to ride at the Grand Prix. He did do so, but he wasn't convincing. He didn't have the nights he was looking for. Going back to Kings Lynn with all those memories of the accident last year, plus the fact that he's not 100% fit, clearly that grippy track at the Adrian Flux Arena proved to be too much. It's not great for Ipswich because, my favourites for the title, I think if they'd all stay fully fit, I think they still would be, but they are vulnerable right now, and it's wide open. Kings Lynn, who I looked at last time I was on telly, and I'm thinking, well, why are they that far behind? But I think they're a good team. I wouldn't be surprised at all that if Kings Lynn put pressure on Leicester or whoever ends up being in 4th place, it could be a bit of a challenge from them because they've got a decent team. And when you've got a Grand Prix rider riding at reserve, I don't quite know how that works. But the fact is, I think he scored, nearly scored 20 points last night, or 18 or 19 points. Yeah. He was like flying. So he had, funny enough, he had quite a bearing on that result.
Yeah, but this is it with Kings Lynn. They are closing the gap on Leicester now, and that is going to be the battle. It's going to be who makes fourth place again. Yes. But you do feel, obviously, we've talked about this before, but Rob Lyon, he's done it before. These teams that are built solidly, where they're always going to have a sort of a bit of a mismatch at reserve in a really experienced hand at reserve, whoever that is.
Well, yeah, they've had three of them already. Harris was there, then it was Clint, and now it's Jankovic. And they carried Neil Kilson-Everson. I've seen the result this morning, who scored 2 points. So, he only scored 2, but the rest of them, and they had a Grand Prix rider a current Grand Prix rider riding at reserve, which is nonsense, really, but that's the way it works, and fair play to Rob Lyon and the management there. They've got this team, and I don't think we've seen the best of them, actually. I really don't. And I'm sure there's more to come from that team. So, you're right, it's been a bit quiet. Ipswich, Chris Louis, obviously, I worked with him on the Grand Prix. He's frustrated, he needs his team firing. And he's got to just hope that they can just hang tough until these guys are fit. And then, let's hope that, the run into the playoffs is there is some jeopardy in it. And it looks like Kings Lynn might be the ones that provide it.
Yeah, they certainly look like they're there or thereabouts now. Oxford's had a bit of a boost but seem to have slipped back. Birmingham at the bottom. Sheffield, they're continuing plugging away. Bellevue, you can't see them slipping up too much, especially with Bewley and Kurtz in the lineup. So, yeah, it is that battle for fourth place. When are you next in action with TNT is the big $1 million question.
We've got Gorshov coming up this weekend, and then Monday the 23rd we are at Ipswich v Leicester. So Leicester, decent outfit. I think they may have even won there already.
Yes, they did. Yeah,
they did.
They were first team to win. Yeah,
they were. So Stuart Dixon, you're aware of Stuart Dixon. He's a lively character, and he will be firing his troops up. And I'm expecting quite a tear up. Actually, I think it could be quite a decent meeting.
Should be. Well, thanks for joining us, Kelvin.
Very well.
Great chatting with you, and we'll pick it up in July, I guess, sometime, and after your various escapades. Where else? What's the Grand Prix lineup in July? Because we did have that gap, didn't we?
We've got Melilla, and then it goes. To be honest, there's a big gap because of no Cardiff. So we've got effectively a month off. So it goes Melilla at the beginning of July, and then it goes to Riga at the beginning of August.
Okay, well, you can kick back, relax, do the garden, whatever.
I've got international commentators to do, actually, through that month.
You motocrossing?
Yeah, no, actually working on the motocross. I think there are 3 World Motocross Champion rounds in July, so they're on Sundays. So actually the other weekend, just before we finish, I went SGP3, SGP, MXGP on the Sunday, and then just for my sins I went to Birmingham on the Monday. And so that was quite a lot of talking, particularly when MXGP on your own, because it's an hour. Each race is an hour with the build-up and the reflection, and I haven't got anybody to defer to, so I need a sponsorship from Strepsils. I've got my agent, which is me. I'm working very hard to be sponsored by Strepsils because, man. And also, it's 2 hours. And if you haven't been to the loo just at the right time before you start, Garen, tell me at the back of the second race, which is 2 and a bit hours in. Yeah, you're running to the loo.
Yeah, that is awkward. You are very much a prisoner there.
I'm enjoying it, and I've got a little bit better at it, so I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, thank you. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.